"You were never a mother, just a wallet." That's what my son said to me, loud enough for his friends to hear. Then he raised his glass and shut the door in my face. It was raining hard, a slow, steady downpour that soaked my coat and matted my hair to my face. I stood on the porch of the house I'd helped him buy, clutching a birthday gift Melissa would never open. David hadn't returned a single one of my calls in nearly a month. No texts. No thank you after the last check I sent to help them cover their taxes. But tonight was Melissa's birthday. I'd always shown up for family birthdays, even when I wasn't wanted. I saw lights through the blinds, laughter, music. So they were home. The door opened. David stood there, wine glass in hand, music thumping behind him. Melissa's friends filled the hallway. Heels, perfume, wine-soaked laughter. He looked annoyed, not surprised, not apologetic. Just, "Tired of me? Mom, you can't keep doing this," he said, keeping his voice level. "Just showing up like you're still part of our lives." I only wanted to drop off her gift. My voice cracked. I held it out, wrapped carefully in soft blue paper. Melissa's favorite color. David glanced at it, then back at me with something like pity. Or maybe embarrassment. "Melissa said this would happen," he muttered. "You always try to buy your way into moments that aren't yours." Melissa stepped into view. "She thinks money makes up for everything," she said, sipping her wine. "As if writing checks makes her a real parent." David turned toward the room. "Melissa's right," he said, louder now so everyone heard. "She was never really a mother, just a wallet." The room erupted in laughter. I stood there, holding the gift like it might protect me from what I'd just heard. David raised his glass toward me. "You don't belong here. Not anymore." And then the door slammed. The lock clicked. I stayed frozen on that porch, rain sliding down my cheeks, into my collar, my hand still outstretched with a gift no one wanted. But what David didn't know, what he never cared to understand, was that I'd never signed the house over fully. My lawyer made sure of that. I was still co-owner. They may have laughed at me, shut their door, written me off, but they did it on land that still had my name on the deed. And they were about to find out what happens when you push someone like me too far, 2 years earlier. Back when I still believed helping them build a future meant I'd be welcome in it. The bank office was overly bright and smelled faintly of stale coffee and toner. I sat between David and Melissa, the pen in my hand feeling heavier than it should have. My husband's wedding band rested on a chain under my blouse, pressing against my chest like a silent witness. "Mom, we couldn't have done this without you," David said, grinning. That boyish proud look on his face, the same one he wore when he brought home spelling bee ribbons or passed his driver's test. "Seriously, thank you." Melissa reached over and squeezed his arm like she'd just won a prize. "It means everything," she said, eyes shiny, her tone sweet and smooth. Too smooth. I told myself it was just emotion. Gratitude, maybe. The paperwork was thick, but I'd gone over it with Mr. Daniels, my lawyer, twice before this meeting. I wasn't just signing away security. I was stepping into something with my eyes open, not a guarantor. Co-owner. That had been Mr. Daniels' advice. "It protects you, Helen. Just in case. Just in case." So I signed. Melissa leaned in to glance at the document as I handed it back. Her manicured finger tapped once, lightly, on my name at the bottom of the page. She didn't smile, just looked away. It wasn't quite annoyance, but it wasn't gratitude either. Something cold brushed the back of my neck, but I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed. Buying a house is stressful after all. Later, we had lunch. They laughed, talked about open concept kitchens and quartz countertops. I picked at my salad and told myself to stop being paranoid. They were a young couple with a future. I was just helping them start strong. And I told myself that meant something. I didn't know then that Melissa had already been telling people, "Helen's just signing so we can get approved. She doesn't actually own anything." But I'd kept the original documents, tucked away safe, signed, notarized, filed under House Company Ownership Agreement. My name in ink. Legal, binding, real. That moment in the bank, I thought I was giving them stability. What I really gave them was opportunity. And what they gave me in return was the start of the end. It started small, just enough to brush off. On David's birthday that first year, I showed up with a homemade German chocolate cake, his favorite since he was 9. Took me all morning. I pulled into the driveway, balanced the cake on my lap as I rang the bell. Melissa answered. "Oh," she said, blinking like I'd ruined something. "Didn't David tell you? We celebrated last night." I stood there, cake in hand. "He didn't mention it." She gave a little shrug. "He probably forgot. You know how he is." I nodded like it didn't sting. She took the cake and said they'd enjoy it later. I never saw the plate again. Then Christmas came. I wore the red sweater I'd knit myself. Soft wool, tiny white trees around the collar. It was festive. I thought it would be nice. David took one look and laughed. "Thrift store chic, Mom?" he said loud enough for Melissa's cousins to hear. The whole room chuckled. Melissa didn't even look up from her phone. I laughed too, pretended it was funny. Sat on the edge of the couch like a guest in a stranger's home. Left before dessert. After that, the invitations started coming late. Or not at all. When I called, the phone would ring and ring until voicemail. I left cheerful messages. "Just checking in. Hope you're all okay." Like I hadn't noticed the silence growing louder. He rarely called back unless he needed something. Once it was for a short-term loan to cover a roof repair. Another time for help with a tax bill. Always polite, always urgent. "We'll pay you back as soon as we can." They never did. But I told myself they were busy. Young families are always busy. Still, something shifted in me the day I called just to hear David's voice and got Melissa instead. "David can't come to the phone," she said curt. "We're in the middle of dinner." I could hear the TV in the background, laughter, forks clinking. She didn't say goodbye, just hung up. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the receiver. The walls felt too quiet, the light too dim. That's when I finally said it aloud. "They don't want me." I think I already knew, but saying it out loud made it real. This wasn't busyness, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was removal, quiet, systematic, a pattern, tiny cuts, each one small, together deep, and I let them happen. But not for much longer. It came from the neighbor across the street, Sharon, who walks her dog past the house every morning like clockwork. We were both in line at the grocery store, making idle small talk about the heat wave. She mentioned casually, "Melissa said you all are heading to California soon. Escaping before the taxes get worse, huh?" I turned, slowly. "What did you say?" Sharon shrugged, unloading grapes onto the conveyor. "They've been talking about it for weeks. I figured you'd be relieved. Start fresh somewhere warm." She said the house would be on the market by the end of summer. I felt my stomach drop. "Melissa said that?" Yep. And your David was out front with a realtor brochure a few days ago." She leaned in slightly, voice lowered. "Between us, I was surprised. You always seemed so settled there." I nodded, or tried to. My hands were shaking too badly to get the milk onto the belt. I left the line entirely, muttering something about forgetting my wallet. In the car, I sat with the engine off, keys in my lap, cold sweat at the base of my neck. They were selling the house. My house. They hadn't asked, hadn't called, not a word. I turned it over in my mind on the drive home, slowly, like something fragile that might cut me if I held it too tight. I replayed the birthday door slam, the silent treatment, the cake that went untouched. I thought it was just distance. But this wasn't distance. This was removal. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest of the way to the house, just in case. I didn't want them to see me. From across the street, I watched Melissa open the door for a woman in business slacks and heels, holding a folder in her hand. They hugged. A realtor. I turned and walked away before they noticed me. My legs moved on their own. My throat was tight with something bitter. It wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was theft. Planned. Polished. Hidden under charm and courtesy. But they forgot something. My name is still on the deed. And I just became the complication they didn't account for. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Laptop open. County property records up on the screen. I hadn't used that site in a few years, but it came back to me quickly enough. You don't forget how to trace a paper trail when you've been filing joint taxes since the Carter administration. Parcel ID, search, owner history, filing dates. And then I saw it. Transfer of interest. July 2nd. Owner, David S. Collins. Sold. No secondary listed. My name was gone. I stared at the screen, rereading the listing details. Pending sale. Do not disturb owners. A contact number for the realtor. Photos of the kitchen. I remodeled myself with my husband in 1992. Photos of my roses. My curtains. They had listed my house without me. Faked something. Forged something. Erased me on paper before they could throw me out for real. I printed every page. Then I logged into my bank account, searched through statements. I still had the file from 2 years ago, the checks I wrote to cover their down payment, the closing costs, the receipts. I laid them out on the dining table like puzzle pieces. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out the original co-ownership agreement. Signed, stamped, still valid. David had once told me, "Don't worry, Mom, you'll always be part of this." Apparently, always had a shelf life. I wasn't angry, not exactly. Not yet. What I felt was colder than anger, quieter. I took out a pen and started making notes. Document numbers, filing discrepancies, the listing date, the date of the forged transfer. They had gone to great lengths to disappear me. But the thing about trying to delete someone from paper is, real paper keeps receipts. And I had every single one. When I was done, I clipped everything into a folder, labeled it in block letters. Property fraud. Collins house. I sat there for a moment longer, breathing slowly. Not as a mother, not as someone heartbroken, but as a woman who had been underestimated one too many times. Then I picked up the phone and dialed Mr. Daniels. Mr. Daniels didn't waste time with sympathy. He read, silently, flipping through the folder page by page. His brow tightened the further he went. By the time he reached the forged transfer of ownership, he set the paper down gently and folded his hands. "Well," he said, "they've made a mistake." I didn't respond. I just looked at him. He knew better than to fill the silence with apologies. "I'll file for an emergency injunction," he continued. "We'll freeze the sale immediately. Once the forgery's documented, the county will flag the listing. It'll stop dead." I exhaled, slow and steady. "And after that, we'll prepare a civil complaint, possibly criminal, depending how bold they were with the paperwork. You'll stay on the deed, of course. You never left it." He tapped the final notarized page I'd brought. "They'll have to explain this. In court." I nodded, but that wasn't enough. Not for me. "I don't want to just stop the sale," I said. My voice was calm, too calm. "I want them to feel it." Daniels looked up and something in his face shifted. Less attorney, more ally. "Then let's do this right," he said. "Because you're not just fighting for a house, Helen. You're reclaiming your place. And people like Melissa, they count on women like you to stay quiet." Not anymore. I looked out the window. The late afternoon light cast long shadows across his office wall. For once, I didn't feel like the shadow. I felt solid, real. For 2 years, I'd tried to be easy, accommodating, flexible, a word Melissa loved to use. Helen's so flexible, so understanding. No, I had been compliant. But understanding and compliance are not the same thing. I helped them buy that house. I gave, and they bled me dry with a smile. But betrayal does something strange to a person. It scrapes you clean. It removes the last layers of hope until all that's left is clarity. And I was clearer than I'd been in years. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about teaching anyone a lesson. Not really. It was about dignity, about not disappearing without a fight. Daniels slid a form across the desk. "Sign here to start the injunction process. I'll take it from there." I signed my name. Slowly, carefully. For the first time in years, I felt like it meant something. Melissa cornered me at the grocery store, a place where I'd once bumped carts with her, both of us laughing about needing more eggs. But this time, She didn't smile. She didn't pretend. I was reaching for a box of chamomile tea when I felt her presence beside me, like perfume and venom wrapped in a designer coat. "Let's not make this ugly," she said. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. "Too late," I replied. Calm, she stepped closer, still smiling, but her voice had that cutting edge she only used when she forgot to pretend. "You're making things harder than they need to be, Helen. You could have gone quietly. Found somewhere more suited for your age." I turned slowly and met her eyes. Calm, measured. "Did you think I wouldn't check the county records?" Melissa's smile didn't falter, but her eyes shifted, just for a second. "I think you're confused," she said smoothly. "David was just updating the paperwork, streamlining things. It's common. Forging ownership is not. Streamlining," I said. Her tone dipped lower, icy under all that silk. "David was just trying to protect you. You don't belong in that house anymore. You know it. It's too big, too much. You need something easier." There it was. The translation of every cold smile and missed call over the past 2 years. "You're in the way." "I'm not your burden, Melissa," I said evenly, "and I'm not your stepping stone." She laughed then, soft and pitying. "You think this is about you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because I had already filed the injunction. The sale was frozen, the documents submitted, the trail laid bare. She didn't know yet, but she would. Melissa leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "You should really consider assisted living, Helen, somewhere with full-time support. Because once that house sells, it won't," I said. Quiet, final. Her smile wavered, just a little. She studied me like she was seeing me for the first time, not as the quiet woman who baked birthday cakes and kept her opinions to herself, but as something more dangerous, something she couldn't control. "Well," she said, stepping back, "we'll see about that." She turned on her heel and walked away, heels sharp against the tile floor. I stood there with my box of tea, heart steady, breathing slow. Let her escalate. I was already ahead. I started with the bank records. Not theirs, mine. Every check I'd written to cover their expenses. Every bank transfer labeled gift in the memo line, because I was too proud to call it what it really was. Survival money. Their survival, not mine. I printed everything, sorted it by year, highlighted the major payments. $6,400 to cover David's dental work, $12,000 for their property tax penalty. And the big one, $38,000 to help them close on the house faster. Funny, that same house was now being listed without my name. I found a real estate flyer on the neighbor's fridge. She hadn't meant to show it to me, but when I stopped by to return a casserole dish, it was right there. A glossy photo of my front porch with a price tag printed underneath. I asked if I could keep it. She said, of course. I added it to the folder. Then came the emails. Sharon's daughter, a junior at the university, had done a summer internship with the realty office Melissa used. I never would have asked for her help, but she called me on her own. "My mom told me what's happening. I think you should see this." She forwarded 3 internal emails. The subject line of the first one read, "When her name is off the paperwork, we're free." Melissa had written it. Attached was a digital checklist for escrow prep, timeline goals, and something called Quiet Exit Strategy Family. The second email was worse. "She won't fight us. She's too old to keep up with the process." That was David's. The third was just a one-line response from the realtor. "Let's proceed." No one said my name. Just her. Like I was a piece of old furniture they were planning to leave behind. I saved the emails, printed hard copies, filed them in a fresh folder labeled Evidence, Sale Without Consent. Then I called Mr. Daniels and told him we'd need to update the case. "This is premeditated," he said. "Calculated. Keep everything." "I already have," I told him. I hung up and stared at the piles of paper spread across my dining table. They thought they were smarter, faster, that I was stuck in some sentimental fog. But what they'd forgotten was simple. I raised a family, survived a marriage, and ran a household on a shoestring for 40 years. I know how to keep receipts, and I never throw them away. His signature is real," Mr. Daniels said quietly, not looking up from the papers spread across his desk. I sat perfectly still. "I'm sorry, Helen," he added, pushing the page toward me. "We had it examined. There's no doubt. He signed the amended deed himself." The words didn't sting. They settled, like dust on old furniture. Not Melissa. Not a mistake. Not something she tricked him into. David had signed me out. On purpose. By hand. I picked up the page and stared at it. I knew that signature. I'd seen it on school permission slips, on thank you cards, on job applications when he was just starting out. I used to be proud of how carefully he wrote it. Neat. Responsible. Now it was just a knife in cursive. They filed it using the original document ID from the co-ownership agreement, Daniels continued. Made it look like a routine transfer, slipped it in during a refinance window hoping the bank wouldn't flag it. And they didn't? No. Most clerks don't cross-reference if the names look familiar. That's how this kind of fraud slips through. Familiarity. Family. Family. That word didn't mean what it used to. Daniel sat back. "We'll have the forged documents invalidated. That part's clean. It's his intent that muddies the water. What happens if he admits he knew? Then he's liable. And Melissa too, since the paper trail shows clear collusion. You're not just looking at an injunction anymore. This is grounds for civil damages. And possibly criminal charges." I didn't say anything for a long time. Daniels waited. He's good at that, at letting silence do its own talking. "I think the worst part," I said finally, "is that I'm not even surprised." Daniels nodded, slow. "That's how betrayal works, Helen. It starts by making you numb to the little things. So when the big thing finally happens, you don't flinch." I flinched, though. Later, at home, I sat in the living room with the lights off. This was the same room where David took his first steps. Same spot where we set up the Christmas tree for 16 straight years. I remembered him curled up on that old couch with the flu, me rubbing his back while he groaned and sniffled. That same boy had signed me away. And yet here I was. Still holding the key to the house he tried to sell out from under me. I wasn't done yet. But I was done protecting his feelings. That night, I didn't file anything. I didn't print documents or highlight bank records. I didn't answer Mr. Daniels' follow-up email. I sat in the dark, alone, in the house I once built with my husband, and let the grief arrive properly, not like a wave, but like a slow flood. It started at my feet, cold, creeping. I had told myself for weeks now that Melissa was the problem, her schemes, her manipulations, her control. And yes, she was all of those things. But David had chosen this, and that's what undid me. I lit a small lamp in the corner, the one with the beaded shade we bought at a garage sale in '84. It cast just enough light to see the hallway. The photographs were still there, my husband in his workshop, David with frosting on his nose at age 5, a blurry Christmas morning in matching pajamas. I stared at those photos for a long time, trying to find the moment I lost him. Was it after his father died? Was it when Melissa entered his life? Or was it earlier? Some tiny crack I ignored because I needed to believe we were still okay. I got up and walked to the hallway. My hand hovered over the photos but didn't touch them. I couldn't. Not yet. I sat down on the floor with my back against the wall and pressed my hands to my chest. Not like prayer, but like holding myself together. The betrayal wasn't just legal. It wasn't just financial. It was personal. I thought of every time I defended him. Every time I said, "He's just tired," or "He didn't mean it that way," or "He's going through a rough patch." I had protected him from judgment, from consequences, from truth. But I hadn't protected myself. Not emotionally. Not when it counted. And now here I was, a woman in her 60s, alone, cut out, pushed aside like furniture too old to match the new design. I cried. Not loud, not shaking, just quiet tears that rolled without permission, soaking into the collar of my sweater. Then I stood up, wiped my face, and turned off the light, because grief had its place, and it had its time. But tomorrow I'd need to be sharp again. They took my trust. They tried to take my home, but they didn't take my name off the fight. I RSVP'd to the farewell dinner. Melissa had sent the invitation to the neighborhood group thread like it was a wedding reception. One last evening in our first home, before the California adventure begins. She even included a photo of the backyard with string lights already hung, performative to the last detail. I clicked yes. Then I called Mr. Daniels. Are the injunction papers filed? They are, he said. Sale is legally frozen, title flagged. Realtor has been notified. Good, I said. Then I'll let them have their little party. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been shut out of birthdays, holidays, Mother's Day brunch, and now here they were, opening my house to the entire neighborhood one last time, pretending I didn't exist. They thought I'd fade away quietly, like a polite mistake. But I wasn't a mistake. I was a storm they didn't see coming. For the next few days, I kept to myself, let them believe it was over, that I had been outmaneuvered. Melissa was always at her most careless when she felt triumphant. The final flyer went up at the mailbox station near the park. Farewell gathering. The Collins new chapter begins. Their names in bold. Mine, of course, nowhere in sight. I had to laugh. The audacity of saying goodbye to a house you don't own, to people who still remembered who paid for the fence, the roof, the new windows, when the first winter nearly froze the pipes. Mr. Daniels met me the morning of the dinner. We reviewed everything. He handed me a stamped copy of the injunction, the property documents, and the highlighted forged transfer. All ready? I nodded. They invited the neighbors. Let's make it a show. He gave me a look I'll never forget. Respect mixed with something else. Awe, maybe, not for what I was doing, but for how calm I was doing it. That evening, I dressed with care. Slacks, blouse, low heels. Not flashy, not fragile, just steady. I put on the necklace my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary, the locket that still held his photo. I tucked the documents into my leather handbag, the same one Melissa once called old-fashioned. Some things age well, darling. I drove slowly, parked one street over, walked in through the back gate. The yard was full of laughter, neighbors sipping wine under fairy lights. David was pouring drinks. Melissa flitted from guest to guest, all champagne smiles and fake warmth. They had no idea the real toast was about to begin. I walked through the back gate like I'd never left. The grass was freshly cut. My rose bushes, the ones I planted in '93, were blooming along the fence line, just as they always did in late summer. I passed the folding tables and lanterns strung across the yard like they were celebrating someone else's victory. David caught sight of me first. His smile froze. Melissa turned next. Her hand tightened around her wine glass just a second too long before she forced her lips into a grin. "Helen," she said, voice warm enough to fool the uninformed. "You made it." "I did," I replied, setting my handbag gently on the patio table. "I wanted to see how the place looked. One last time." A few neighbors turned toward us, drinks halfway to their mouths. The music kept playing, soft and upbeat. Melissa laughed nervously. "Well, we're saying goodbye to this old place, on to better weather and bigger opportunities." David shifted beside her, silent. I smiled. Then I reached into my bag. The folder came out smooth, clean, heavy with the weight of truth. I opened it slowly, deliberately, like pulling back the curtain at the final act of a play. "I thought," I said clearly, "since you're making speeches about leaving, it was time for a little correction." A pause. A hush. The music was still playing, but it sounded distant now. I laid the documents out on the patio table, one by one. "The co-ownership deed," I said, tapping it, "signed and notarized. My name, legally binding. Next, the forged transfer filed without my consent. Then, the injunction, officially freezing any attempt to sell this house." Gasps now. Soft murmurs from the neighbors. Melissa's voice went thin. "This isn't the time, Helen." "On the contrary," I said calmly, "this is the perfect time. You invited everyone to say goodbye. I thought they deserved to know there's no goodbye." I looked directly at David. His face had gone pale. He hadn't moved. "You tried to sell what wasn't yours," I said. "You forged documents, lied to your neighbors." and erased your mother from the home she helped you buy. I turned to the room. This house is not theirs to sell. It never was. And now, thanks to this injunction, it never will be. The silence was deafening. And then someone, I think it was Mr. Riley, from down the block, actually clapped. Just once. You could hear the wind brushing the hedges. The music had stopped. Someone had turned it off. No one was laughing anymore. Melissa stood frozen, her jaw clenched so tightly I thought her teeth might crack. David hadn't said a word since I arrived. Good. Let them listen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I let the papers speak. I pulled out the next sheet. Here, I said, holding it up, is the email from Melissa to the realtor, scheduling open house showings before the forged transfer even processed. Gasps again. One neighbor whispered, "Unbelievable." I set the paper down carefully. Next, I said, pulling another printed page from the folder, David's email confirming he'd handle getting me off the paperwork quietly. I met his eyes. Your words, not mine. David's mouth opened, but nothing came out. And finally, the cherry on top. An internal realtor communication titled, and I quote, "Once her name is gone, we're free." I looked at Melissa. That's your phrasing, isn't it? Her face flushed red, then pale. She's twisting this, Melissa said, her voice brittle. She doesn't understand how these things work. No, I stepped forward just slightly. Then explained the forgery, the illegal filing, the sale without consent, the financial documents showing I still pay the taxes on this place. Mr. Daniel stepped from the crowd, his suit clean and pressed, his expression neutral but firm. The court will understand just fine, he said, holding up a stamped envelope. These documents have already been submitted. The sale is frozen. Any attempt to proceed will result in immediate legal action. I nodded once. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't scared. I didn't come here for revenge, I said. I came for clarity. You tried to sell this home out from under me, after I helped you build it, after I covered your debts, after I trusted you. I looked at the neighbors, all of them watching, silent. This isn't just about real estate, I said. This is about erasure, about entitlement, about what happens when a woman's presence is seen as inconvenient. Melissa turned abruptly and stormed into the house. David stood there, limp, useless. One of the neighbors finally said, "Helen, I had no idea." I smiled faintly. That was the plan, and now the plan had collapsed, publicly, legally, completely. The moment the last document hit the table, the spell broke. The guests weren't sipping wine anymore. They were gathering purses, murmuring to spouses. A few exchanged glances like they were waking from a dream, because the lie had snapped. Melissa came storming back out of the house with her heels off, holding her phone in one hand, shouting into it like it was a weapon. She has no right to do this here in front of people. This is harassment. Her voice rose into something shrill. Yes, the sale is paused, but... No, I said paused. David trailed behind her, his hands half raised, as if still trying to manage the optics. Can we just talk? Mom, please? This isn't how we wanted this to go. I turned to him. You forged my name, David. His mouth opened, then shut. Melissa hissed. Just call the realtor back and tell her it's a temporary delay. We'll get around it. Actually, Mr. Daniel said, stepping forward, you won't. Any further attempt to market or show this house will violate a court-ordered injunction. You proceed, you get sued. It's that simple. He handed David a copy of the stamped notice. Here's your copy. You'll want to keep it handy. David took it like it was on fire. A few neighbors lingered. Mrs. Riley, the Petersons, Tom from 2 doors down, watching, processing. No one looked at Melissa. Not now. She spun on me one last time. You think you've won? You think dragging this out is going to change anything? You're old, Helen. You can't live in that house forever. I stepped toward her, just enough to look her in the eye. No, Melissa, I said softly, but I'll live here long enough to make sure you never do. And I meant it. Melissa's face twisted. She turned on her heel, barking at David to do something, before stomping off toward the front door. He didn't follow right away. He just stood there, holding that copy of the injunction like it weighed more than anything I ever gave him. A few guests gave me quiet nods as they left. One older man muttered, "Good for you," as he passed. The yard emptied slowly, and with every goodbye that wasn't for David or Melissa, the air shifted. It was my house again, not just by deed, but by truth. They had been the hosts, the center, the power. Now they were just the problem. And I was the storm that would never be ignored again. By the time dessert was supposed to be served, half the yard was empty. The folding chairs sat like abandoned props. The string lights still glowed, but they looked cheap now, like decorations left behind after a failed wedding. Melissa slammed the front door hard enough to rattle the porch. David stayed outside for a few minutes longer, hands in his pockets, pretending to make small talk with a couple from the next street over. They didn't linger. No one did. By the next morning, the story had traveled farther than their moving truck ever would. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Sharon told me over coffee. 3 people called me about the party before 9 a.m. She leaned in like we were sharing a state secret. The Petersons are furious. Said they felt used. Said Melissa's been telling people you were moving into a care facility, that the house was already sold. I stirred my tea. She's not very good at math, is she? I'm still here, Sharon grinned. And suddenly, she's not. Melissa stopped showing her face around the neighborhood. No more jogs and expensive yoga gear. No more loud phone calls in the driveway. No more controlling the group thread. David tried to do damage control. He came to my porch one afternoon, no warning, holding a gift bag and wearing that stiff half smile I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, trying to get out of trouble. I just wanted to talk, he said. We got carried away. Melissa thought. I held up a hand. No, David, you thought. He hesitated. It's complicated. No, it's documented. He looked down at the gift bag. A bottle of wine and a card inside. I didn't want things to get like this. I almost laughed. Get like this? You erased me, I said. And you did it for money. There's no other version. He blinked fast. We were drowning in debt. Okay. I thought if we could just sell the house and start fresh. You thought I'd die quietly, I said, and leave the door unlocked on my way out. He didn't argue. He just stood there, guilt pressing on his shoulders like sandbags. I didn't invite him in, and he didn't ask. The bag sat on the porch for 3 days before I tossed it in the bin. The card was blank anyway. Melissa stopped returning his calls, according to Sharon. Whatever they had, house, reputation, community, it was crumbling, and I hadn't lifted a single finger to destroy it. I had simply told the truth. I didn't celebrate. There was no grand toast, no victory dance in the living room. That wasn't my way. Instead, I trimmed my roses the next morning. They'd grown wild during the storm of it all, heavy blooms bending under their own weight. I pruned them back gently, just as I had every summer for 30 years. That was enough. The letters started arriving 2 weeks later, a certified notice from the county, confirming the injunction was upheld. Ownership remained shared. The forged transfer? Invalidated. Permanently. The notary who signed it. Under investigation. Then, a letter from the realtor's firm. Terse, embarrassed, backing out of all representation, and citing ethical concerns. I clipped it to the folder, just in case. And finally, one from David. Not a phone call, not a visit, just a letter. Handwritten, shaky in spots, like he wasn't sure if he should apologize or beg. I know what we did was wrong. Melissa's gone to stay with family. I've had to give up the house hunt. Things have been difficult. We're in a 1-bedroom now. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. There was no return address. Just a stamped envelope and silence. I didn't write back. They had spent 2 years carving me out of their lives. One missing invitation, one cruel remark, one lie at a time. Then they tried to take the last thing I had left, my home, and with it my dignity. And now they had lost the house, not because I took it, but because they tried to steal it. They had lost their standing in the neighborhood, not because I said a word, but because the truth finally spoke for itself. They had lost comfort, security, and the illusion of control. Meanwhile, I gained something they never expected. Peace. Not happiness, not yet. That comes slowly, like spring. But peace. Real, grounded peace. One afternoon, I sat on the front porch with a cup of coffee and watched the sun dip low behind the trees. The same porch where David once built a Lego castle beside my feet. The same porch where Melissa smiled through her wedding photos back when I still believed she loved my son for who he was, not for what she could take. I rocked gently in the chair my husband made with his own hands, and I smiled, not because they were suffering, but because I was still here, still standing, still home.